Our next speaker is Karen Wisely. She is a PhD history candidate at UNT. Her dissertation topic recounts formation of Dallas's GLBT community, following up with her master's thesis on the same topic. Wisely is a 3-time recipient of the C.M. Caldwell Memorial Award, sponsored by the Texas State Historical Association, and has presented papers at meetings of the Oral History Association and the East Texas Historical Association. For more than 2 years, she has been an Ally Program student assistant in the Office of Equality and Diversity at UNT. And on a personal note, Karen has been with the Dallas Way since our very first meeting, came down from UNT, heard through the grapevine, and has been a huge help to us from day one. Please welcome Karen Wisely.
Thank you, Robert. First of all, I would like to thank the Dallas Way organization, of course, and the University of North Texas Library and Archive, and the Resource Center for making my dissertation research so much easier. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the ability to go upstairs, ask for a certain box, take it back to the table, and already have an idea of what's going to be in that box. I promise you I will never take that for granted. I will always suck up to librarians and archivists for as long as I'm a historian. I promise you that, okay? I thank you, Dallas Way, for these events because I've attended most of them. I think I've missed a couple here and there. But the people who have spoken up here, I have chased down and interviewed further a lot of times. And these events have helped me direct my research and direct who to talk to. So I appreciate all of you so very much. When I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, the theme of coming out kept coming back. And it's not because this is some big coming out event in my life, although to my knowledge I've never been on YouTube before. It's because Saturday is National Coming Out Day. And that is one of the big gay holidays, and one of the 2 big gay holidays that I actually celebrate every year, the other being the Academy Awards ceremony. It's true. I'm not entirely sure. I get confused about which month is Gay History Month. It's October, in case anyone wonders. I remember what day Stonewall happened, but there isn't much celebration in Dallas to commemorate it because our pride is in September, but sometimes I forget whether it's the 2nd or the 3rd Sunday, so I sometimes miss that. But every year on October 11th, I make a point to observe National Coming Out Day, even though anyone who has spent about 5 minutes with me already knows that I'm a lesbian. I do so because I strongly support its message. Because I'm a history teacher at heart, and because I can't imagine spending 15 entire minutes talking about myself, I'm going to discuss a little bit about the history of National Coming Out Day. Forgive me if you already know this. In October of 1979, to commemorate the 10th anniversary of Stonewall, there was a march on Washington. Some of the speakers that we've had here in the past actually attended it and have a lot of good stories about, especially the plane ride, which apparently was pretty raucous, on the way to Washington. The United States Park Police estimated that about 50,000 gay men and lesbians marched down Pennsylvania Avenue and gathered in the National Mall to demand equal rights, including, like I said, some of the leaders of the Dallas community. Some felt the turnout was disappointingly low, however, especially when compared to the estimated 250,000 that gathered to hear Martin Luther King Jr. give his I Have a Dream speech in '63. But it was definitely a testament to the time. Not many people were willing to be out, in spite of people like Harvey Milk encouraging them to be so. It was still too dangerous. In my class, because I teach here at UNT, when I teach 2620, the second half of the survey, I use as kind of a symbol of the 1970s, late 70s, early 80s, the village people. Okay? They were okay. People accepted them as long as they didn't really have to think very hard about the fact that they were gay. Right? So you could, by all means, do the YMCA dance. Just don't listen to the lyrics. Okay? 8 years after that disappointing, and I'll use quotes there, showing at the 1979 March on Washington, the United States Park Police estimated that more than 200,000, and some estimates say up to 500,000, attended the second march in 1987. In the interim, of course, AIDS happened. The governmental response to the health crisis was abhorrent at every level, local, state, and federal, with officials seemingly willing to allow deaths to continue unabated because it didn't affect anyone they cared about. It was just the gays. Thousands had died, and suddenly, being out was the less scary alternative. In fact, it seemed imperative. Studies have shown that when people know even one single LGBT person in their lives, they are more likely to support full equality for LGBT people. It was in this climate that Jean O'Leary, then head of the National Gay Rights Advocates, and Rob Eichberg, founder of the personal growth workshop, The Experience, promoted the idea of having a national day to celebrate coming out and chose the anniversary of the Second March on Washington to do so. There you have National Coming Out Day. And having told you all of that, I'm going to say that coming out is a process, not a one-time event, and something we all do almost every day. So I'm sure we all have coming out stories. In fact, we probably have a lot of them. My first coming out story, when I came out to myself, which is wording that I always have hated, it seems awkward. I first admitted to myself that I was gay and accepted myself as being a lesbian May 5th, 1994. And that's when I discovered that I had, in fact, been dating my best friend for the past year without my knowledge. There were several points within that time that I should have known, like when she told me that she had fallen in love with a woman, but didn't say who, or when we sat on the beach in Galveston watching the moon rise over the bay. But I wasn't really good at social cues. So it caught me completely by surprise when that night she told me that it was me that she had fallen for and asked me what I was going to do about it. I thought about it for a while, and it explained so much in my life. So I accepted it pretty quickly. I came out to my mother a few years later when that same woman broke up with me on my birthday. Now, to be fair, she had never once remembered my birthday and the time we were together, or the time before that when we were just friends. So I tend to believe breaking up on my birthday was more horribly bad luck and not malicious intent on her part. Anyhow, every year my mother would call me on my birthday to sing happy birthday. And that year when she called, I responded by sobbing. It stopped the singing right away, that's for sure. And when I told her why, she was a champ, never even pausing before proclaiming that she loved me and we would get through this. And we did. I'm going to jump forward in this story, I know you're all relieved, to when I was hired to work for the Ally program. I had gone back to college and chosen history as my path, and honestly, sometimes I think that telling the members of my family who support me unconditionally that I was going to get an advanced degree in history has been more difficult than telling them I was gay. That they accepted with no reservations. History, not so much. There's no future in it. What are you going to do? Teach? I should probably tell you that I'm the youngest by quite a bit of 8 children, and my oldest sister, the firstborn, was a teacher. So I grew up grading papers for her, coloring, cutting out, laminating, cutting again, and had stated numerous times that I may not know exactly what I was going to be when I grew up, but I knew that I would never, ever, ever be a teacher. I was wrong about that, but I was right about never having kids, so there's that. Anyhow, I went in and interviewed for the job as the Ally Program student worker with Dan Emenheiser, who is Director of Diversity Education in the Equity and Diversity Division of UNT. He sent me to talk to Mary Finley, who is Assistant Director for the University Union and a strong LGBT ally, and Sue Young, who I think was working for the Faculty Senate at the time, before giving me the okay. And I must have succeeded because they gave me the job. I did a lot of different things. I updated the website, wrote up press releases, which is where I first became familiar with Raphael, and designed flyers for events. And there were a lot of events when Dan was in charge. We had speakers come in for LGBT History Month, October, and he'd usually have Edgar Bogle come in before elections to brief everyone on the issues related. And there was the lesbian conference that we had every year that brought in some pretty amazing people. My favorite was Kate Kendall, who is the director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights. Dan was a pretty amazing guy, but not what we like to call tech savvy. He arrived at the office way early every morning and would email a list of things that I needed to do that day. That's great. That's what he should do. But then, after sending it to me via email, he would print the list out and tape it to the monitor of the computer on my desk. And then, when I would do things and save them on the shared drive, it's shared drive, and it's called the shared drive because it's shared throughout the office, he would still request that I email them to him because he couldn't find them, and print them out so that he could then edit them. He was a non-tech savvy guy, but he was very organized. He had a great work ethic, and he genuinely cared about everyone who worked for him. What the job with the Ally program did for me was provide a direction, almost a calling, if you will. I've loved history since I was in grade school, looking for a book to read and happened upon one that my sister, recently married and moved out of the house, had left behind, and it was called The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop. I read it, way above my reading level, by the way, and was hooked. Becoming a history grad student was a much bigger step, but I was driven to find my history. You see, my dad had died when I was 3, and nobody ever really wanted to talk about him when I was growing up. As a lesbian, which I knew I was by the time I decided to pursue history as a career, you don't really learn your history. I don't think I even knew what Stonewall was back then, to be honest with you. I didn't even have any idea what kind of history I wanted to pursue when I took the job with Ally, up to the time I started working there. Don't get me wrong, I wanted to go into sports history because it sounded really fun, and it still does sound a lot of fun, but that's not really where you go to find yourself if you're me, okay? So meeting the people who I met during those years, people from the community like Patty Fink and Rebecca Covell and Louise Young, piqued my interest, and I began to look into the matter. I met Phil Johnson through the job and decided that here was a subject that was waiting for a history grad student to make it their own. I was still working for the Ally program when Dan died, in June 2006. Those were horrifically sad days as we planned a memorial service. I have to say, I was volunteered to speak at that event and couldn't really come up with anything ahead of time, so I thought, I'll just wing it, because I'm great at doing that sort of thing. I didn't do well at all, and I mainly told you that because I wanted you to appreciate that I wrote these comments down ahead of time. When Dan died, the whole office changed. No one wanted to fill the position because we couldn't even imagine anyone being in his office. I became the go-to guy, or as I like to call it, the token, when they needed someone to attend LGBT events, cocktail parties, meet and greets, you name it. Hey Karen, can you run home really quick and change into dress clothes? Sure. It was always a chore at those events to explain people what it is I studied. History? Why? I only lasted a year after Dan died. The department went through reorganization. It's a very different place over there now. Now I'm well on my way to getting that PhD to become the teacher that I said I would never be. And now I go to history conferences and am inevitably faced with the question, so what do you study? Now, because we're all historians there, they actually want to know. And here's where we come to full circle back to the National Coming Out Day. Because this is a decision that we must consciously make every day to come out, and to be okay with it. What I study is the formation of the Dallas gay and lesbian community from the first organization, the Circle of Friends, formed in 1965, through the community's response to the AIDS crisis, so late 1980s, early 1990s. But every time I am asked that question at a conference, I think to myself, do I really want to tell them this? Are they going to stare at me awkwardly, mumble something, and then get the heck out of there as fast as they can? Or will I find an ally? And I admit that there have been a couple of times when I've just said, I studied 20th century American history and moved on. I probably shouldn't have, and I promise you, standing here, that I never will again.